Welcome back, everyone. For most of us, school was a second home, a place of learning, friendships, and awkward phases we try to forget. We think of these buildings as safe zones, monitored by teachers and staff, walled off from the dangers of the outside world. But sometimes, the walls are not as secure as we believe. Sometimes, the threat is not outside, but walking the same halls, sitting in the same classrooms, or waiting just beyond the school gates. The 6 stories you are about to hear are from people who discovered the terrifying truth firsthand. They are reminders that evil does not care about school zones. Before we begin, comment below with where you are watching from and what time it is. I am always curious to see how far these stories travel. Now, be careful out there. In 2019, when I was 15 and just starting my junior year, my social life was basically non-existent. Years of being bullied had made me shy and introverted, so I spent most of my time online. My escape was a Twitter account I created under an anonymous username. I was extremely careful with it. My profile picture was a cartoon avatar. I never used my real name, and I set my location to London, even though I lived in a quiet suburb of Chicago. I only had about 20 followers, and my timeline was mostly just me resharing art and stupid memes. It was my safe, private little corner of the internet. One evening in October, I got a direct message from an account I did not recognize. The profile looked normal enough, with about 200 followers. The message read something like, "Hi, my name is Alex. I'm 17. I saw you tweeted about the 504 bus line, and I was wondering if you live in Northwood. I'm moving there soon and starting at Northwood High, and I'm looking to make some friends." My heart did a little flip. I had, in fact, made a tweet complaining about the 504 bus a few weeks earlier. It was a stupid offhand comment, but he had found it. My initial thought was that it was a little weird, but I was also lonely and desperate for a connection. His age seemed about right, since I was a year ahead of my classmates. I was bored, and he was polite, so I replied. I told him that yes, I did live in Northwood and went to the high school there. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. We talked for hours that night, mostly about the school, which teachers were cool, how bad the cafeteria food was, the usual high school stuff. As it got later, he started trying to ask more personal questions. Do you live far from the school? Is it a house or an apartment? Do you live with both of your parents? Are you home alone a lot? The questions were too specific and made me uncomfortable. I avoided answering them, and to his credit, he did not push it. If he had, I probably would have blocked him right then. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, this became our routine. We talked every single night. He was handsome in his pictures, incredibly kind, and he actually seemed interested in what I had to say. For a girl who was used to being invisible or made fun of, he was everything I could have wanted. I quickly developed a massive crush on him. My history of being bullied made me quick to put my blind trust in anyone who showed me a bit of friendliness. The day before our 2-week fall break ended, he messaged me with exciting news. He had finally moved in with his mom and would be starting at my high school the next day. He asked if we could meet up somewhere during the morning break. I was ecstatic. I suggested we meet in the main hall by the trophy cases, but he immediately shot that down. He said he was shy and would prefer a more isolated place. He was worried he would have a hard time recognizing me in a crowd and did not want to spend the whole break searching. It sounded like a reasonable excuse to me. I suggested the 3rd floor bathroom. It was in an old, rarely used wing of the school, and students were not allowed to hang out there during breaks. I knew we would not be disturbed. In my head, I reasoned that even if it was a little creepy, we were still in a school building. Nothing bad could happen to me there, right? The next day, I spent extra time getting ready. I wore my favorite sweater and counted down the minutes to the first break. When the bell finally rang, I ran up the 3 flights of stairs to the empty bathroom and waited, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. A minute later, he walked in. It was definitely him. He looked just like his profile pictures, so he was not a catfish. But seeing him in person, I noticed something was off. He seemed older than 17. There were fine lines around his eyes when he smiled, and he carried himself with a confidence that felt more like a man in his mid-20s than a high school senior. But I was so happy to finally meet him that I pushed the thought out of my head. We talked for the whole break, and it was just as easy as it was online. He was charming and funny, and I was completely smitten. This became our new routine. Every morning, we met in the secluded third-floor bathroom, and every afternoon, he would walk me from the school to my bus stop. One strange thing was that in the month and a half this went on, I never once saw him in the hallways, the cafeteria, or anywhere else on campus. I just figured the school was huge, over 1,500 students, and our schedules just never lined up. I wanted to believe in him, so I made excuses for all the little things that did not add up. On December 14th, a Thursday, I was having a particularly bad day. I was complaining to him about how lonely I was going to be that evening. In a moment of incredible stupidity, I told him my entire family's schedule. My dad was on a business trip overseas. My older brother was staying at a friend's house. My little sister was away on a school trip, and my mom had to work a double shift at the hospital and would not be home until late. I basically handed him a detailed report confirming that I would be home completely alone. I had come to trust him so much that it did not even occur to me how dangerous that information was. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop as usual. We waited together, I got on the bus, and I waved to him as I put in my earphones. It was about 5:45 p.m., so it was already pitch black outside. My house was only 2 stops away. As I got off the bus and started walking down my quiet residential street, a terrible feeling washed over me. It was that primal, uncomfortable sensation in my stomach that told me I was being watched. I paused my music but kept my earbuds in my ears, pretending I could not hear anything. That is when I heard them. Footsteps behind me. They were soft, trying to be quiet, but they were unmistakably there. I knew it was not a neighbor out for a walk. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that someone was following me, and they did not have good intentions. He was not rushing to catch up to me. He was stalking me, keeping us at distance. As quietly as I could, I reached into my coat pocket and wrapped my fingers around my house keys. When I got to my walkway, I ran. I sprinted as fast as I could up the short path to my front door, the best sprint of my life. I do not know how I managed it with my hand shaking so violently, but I got the key in the lock and the door open. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut, turning the deadbolt just as his body slammed against the other side. I deactivated the loud beep of the security alarm, which unfortunately confirmed to him that I was, in fact, home alone. I crept to the small glass panel on the door and looked out. It was Alex. He was standing on my porch, just a few feet away, staring at me. But the kind, handsome face I had a crush on was gone. His expression was twisted into a terrifying, predatory sneer. He had followed me home. To this day, I do not know why I did not call the police right then. I think I was just paralyzed by shock and fear. For a long minute, we just stared at each other through the glass. Then, I snapped out of it. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find from the butcher block. When I got back to the door, he was still there, banging on it with his fist. The wood vibrated with each impact. I was terrified the glass was going to shatter. I braced myself against the door, praying it would hold as he started kicking it, harder and harder. Those few minutes felt like an eternity. Finally, he stopped. He went around the house, knocking on all the windows, testing them. Then he came back to the front door, his face red with anger. Just then, a pair of headlights swept across my front lawn. My neighbor was pulling into their driveway. Alex saw the car, probably thinking it was my mom coming home, and he bolted, disappearing into the darkness of the street. Before I could even process what had happened, my phone started blowing up with notifications from Twitter. It was him, sending me hundreds of hateful, threatening messages. I blocked him, and a moment later, his entire account was deleted. I thought it was over, but then new accounts started following me, all with his first initial and a string of random numbers. They sent me horrible, insulting messages. The only way I could make it stop was to delete my account entirely. A few days later at school, I gathered the courage to ask some of the people who were supposed to be in his classes if they knew an Alex. None of them had ever heard of him. I went to the main office and asked for a student directory. He was not in it. This guy, this man I had developed feelings for and trusted with my secrets, was never a student at my high school. He was a ghost. He had built an elaborate fake identity for over a month, all to get close to me. I never heard from him again, but I'm still haunted by the question of what he wanted and what he would have done to me that night if my neighbor had not come home when they did. I am just incredibly fortunate that I never had to find out. High school is a sensory nightmare for someone like me. I am on the autism spectrum, and the main hallways between classes were my personal version of hell. The chaotic shouting, the screech of sneakers on linoleum, the overwhelming perfume cloud, the constant, unpredictable bumping from 1,000 other students, it was all too much. To cope, I had permission to use a special classroom called the support room. It was a quiet, dimly lit space for kids who needed a break from the main school environment, whether it was for emotional issues, anxiety, or sensory overload like mine. I never really talked to anyone in there besides the 2 teachers who supervised the room. My routine was simple. I would find an empty corner, put on my headphones, and either listen to music or work on my assignments in peace. I was in my own little bubble, completely shut off from the usual high school drama. That bubble was burst in the fall of my freshman year, when I was 14. There was a guy in the support room, an older student named Ethan. He was a senior, 18 years old, and he was always there. He had this unsettling stillness about him. While other kids fidgeted or talked quietly, he would just sit and stare, sometimes at a wall, sometimes at his hands. I tried to ignore him, but I often felt his eyes on me. It was a prickly, uncomfortable sensation on the back of my neck. The support room was my sanctuary, but the bus loop after school was another source of anxiety. I took the special needs bus because the regular ones were too loud and crowded. My bus was always the last to arrive and parked at the furthest end of the loop. To avoid the chaos, I would wait by a small grove of trees nearby, listening to music and humming to myself until I saw my bus pull in. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was lost in a song, a shadow fell over me. I looked up, and it was Ethan. I was startled. In the months I had seen him in the support room, we had never spoken a single word. He just stood there for a moment before speaking. "I see you here every day," he said. His voice was flat, without any emotion. He told me he had a crush on me. It was so abrupt and strange, especially since we were total strangers. That was the first warning sign, a massive blaring alarm that my naive 14-year-old brain chose to ignore. The second alarm went off immediately after. "Do you want to go to prom with me?" he asked. I was a freshman. He was a senior. The very idea was absurd. Before I could even process how to respond, my bus pulled up. Flustered and just wanting the awkward encounter to end, I did something incredibly stupid. He asked for my number, and I gave it to him. I mumbled a quick goodbye and got on the bus, eager to escape. As I walked away, he said something that made the contents of my stomach turn to ice. With that same flat, emotionless voice, he said, "I love you." I was not even in my seat before my phone buzzed. It was a text from him, then another, and another. By the time the bus pulled out of the school parking lot, he had sent me over 20 messages. They were a rapid-fire barrage of questions. What was I doing? Who was I with? What was my favorite color? What was my address? It was a digital interrogation. I muted his contact, but the notifications kept lighting up my screen. It felt like he was trying to crawl through the phone and into my life. I was completely overwhelmed. When I got home, I showed my parents. My dad's face grew dark as he scrolled through the endless stream of messages. They explained to me that because he was 18 and I was 14, his behavior was not just creepy. It was illegal. The word predator was used. That night, I sat down and methodically blocked his number. I blocked him on every social media platform I had, even ones I barely used. I felt a wave of relief, thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Blocking him online did not stop him from existing in my physical world. He started trying to talk to me at school. He would suddenly appear next to my locker or be waiting outside one of my classes. He would corner me in the support room, forcing me to take off my headphones. At first, I tried to be polite, telling him I was not interested and that he was making me uncomfortable, but he did not seem to understand or care. His persistence was suffocating. After the fourth or fifth time he cornered me, I finally snapped. I told him in a harsh, loud voice to leave me alone, that if he spoke to me one more time, my parents would go to the police and have him arrested. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, anger. But he backed away, and for a while, he finally left me alone. The silence lasted for a few months, but the fear never really went away. I stopped using the support room as much, choosing to endure the noisy hallways rather than risk being trapped in that quiet room with him. I changed my route to the bus loop and never waited by the trees again. The experience taught me a hard lesson. My gut had been screaming at me from the first moment I saw him staring at me in that room. It screamed at me when he approached me by the trees, and it screamed at me when he said those 3 terrifying words. I learned that it is always okay to listen to that feeling. You do not owe anyone your time or your kindness, especially when they make you feel unsafe. Some people see boundaries not as lines to respect, but as challenges to overcome. And I was lucky to get away from one of them before he could do any real damage. I was 16, a sophomore in a magnet program for the performing arts. Our school was one of those sprawling, single-story campuses built in the 70s, located on the outskirts of Reno. From the back of the school, you could see the dark, jagged outline of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and at night, the empty space between our buildings and the foothills felt immense and unnerving. In the fall of 2022, we were putting on a stage production of an old, obscure play. I was not a main character. I had a handful of lines in the first act, playing a messenger who basically just laid out the plot for the audience. After my scene was done, I was free for the rest of the night. Most of us with smaller parts would hang out in the hallway directly behind the main stage. It was a cramped, dusty space that smelled of old wood, cheap paint, and nervous sweat. The walls were lined with half-finished set pieces and racks of costumes from previous shows. At the far end of this hall was a heavy metal door with a small wire-reinforced window. This door led directly out to the school's athletic fields and the vast, unlit darkness beyond. After I got off stage, my adrenaline was still pumping. I changed out of my costume and joined a group of other actors in the backstage hall. I was talking to my friend Chloe when we heard it. A single hard knock on that metal door at the end of the hall. It was so out of place that our conversations just died. Everyone froze. We all looked down the cluttered hallway toward the door. What was that? Leo, a senior who had the lead role, asked, his voice low. A few people shrugged nervously. It was pitch black outside, and the show was in full swing. There was absolutely no reason for anyone to be out there, let alone knocking on the backstage door. We all started staring at the small window in the door, but it was like looking into a bottle of ink. You could not see a thing. My curiosity got the better of my common sense. I started walking toward the door. Leo was right behind me, and he whispered, "Dude, what are you doing?" Let me go first. He was bigger than me and had this protective older brother vibe, but I was feeling bold. I guess I wanted to seem brave in front of the upperclassmen. Shaking my head, I reached the door and put my hand on the cold metal bar. With a deep breath, I pushed it open. A blast of cold desert air hit me in the face. It carried the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. I stepped out onto the small concrete stoop and looked around. Another actor, Ben, stood in the doorway behind me, silhouetted by the dim hallway light. The field was a massive black void. The only light came from the distant glow of the city and a pale sliver of moon. I scanned the area near the door, my eyes trying to adjust, but there was nothing. No one. Just the sound of the wind whispering through the dry grass and the muffled sounds of the play coming from inside. Feeling a little foolish, I stepped back inside and shut the door, making sure the lock clicked. Chloe and a few others immediately started scolding me. "What is wrong with you? You don't just open a door like that." I brushed it off, but a small knot of anxiety had formed in my stomach. The rest of the night passed without incident, and I soon forgot about the knock. After the show ended and we finished cleaning up, I went to wait for my mom in the staff parking lot. It was around 10:30 at night, and the lot was almost empty. It was located on the same side of the building as the backstage door, adjacent to that same dark field. I put in my earbuds, started playing some music, and leaned against a concrete pillar, scrolling through my phone. The air was crisp and cold now. After a few minutes, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. I looked up toward the field. At first, I thought it was just an animal, maybe a coyote. I pulled out an earbud and squinted into the darkness. That is when I saw them. Two distinct human shapes, standing under the deep shadow of a large cottonwood tree about 50 yards away. It was too dark to make out their features, but I could tell they were tall. One was holding something long and thin that glinted faintly when they shifted. It looked like a metal baseball bat. The other person just stood beside him, perfectly still. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold air crawled up my spine. They were just standing there, watching the school, watching the parking lot, watching me. Without thinking, I cupped my hands around my mouth and yelled, "Hey, what are you guys doing over there?" It was a stupid thing to do. The moment the words left my mouth, they both turned their heads in my direction. There was no hesitation. They immediately broke into a sprint, running directly toward me. Panic flooded my system. My mom was not there yet. The parking lot was empty. My only option was the school. I turned and bolted for the same set of doors I had just come out of, banging my fist on the locked glass. I risked a glance over my shoulder. They were closing the distance fast, their feet pounding on the asphalt. They were definitely grown men. Luckily, Chloe was just on the other side of the door, gathering her things. She saw the terror on my face and quickly unlocked it. I scrambled inside, and she slammed the heavy door shut behind me, throwing the lock. "What's wrong? What happened?" she asked, her eyes wide. Before I could answer, a loud metallic bang echoed through the hallway as something heavy hit the door. My stomach plummeted. We both jumped back and looked at the door's window. Two faces were pressed against the glass, their features distorted and grotesque. They looked to be in their 30s, with grimy faces and wild eyes. One of them, the one I had seen with the bat, raised it and slammed it against the door again. The other man held up a long serrated knife, tapping the blade against the glass. Chloe let out a terrified scream. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone, but she managed to dial 911. She yelled through the door, her voice cracking, "I'm calling the cops. They are on their way right now." The instant she said that, the men's expressions changed. They shared a look, then immediately turned and ran back toward the field, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared. When the police arrived a few minutes later, we told them everything. They searched the area under the cottonwood tree. What they found was terrifying. They discovered a pile of cigarette butts, some empty beer cans, and a crumpled pamphlet for our play. The officer showed it to me. On the cast list, 3 names had been circled with a red pen. The 2 seniors with the lead roles and me. My name was circled multiple times. The police believed the men had been there since the start of the play, just waiting. They figured that when they knocked on the backstage door earlier, they were hoping one of us, one of the circled names, would come out alone. They must have thought a few high school actors would be easy targets. I do not know what they wanted, but I know it was nothing good. I am just incredibly grateful that Leo was behind me when I opened that door, and that Chloe was there to let me back in. It taught me a terrifying lesson. You never know who's out there in the darkness, watching and waiting for their chance. When I was 5 years old, my kindergarten class had the Stranger Danger assembly. I remember sitting on the colorful rug in the school auditorium, half listening as a police officer told us all the rules. Do not take candy from people you do not know. Do not get in a car with a stranger, and if someone tries to grab you, you should scream, "This is not my dad," as loud as you can. To my 5-year-old mind, it all felt very abstract, like a story about monsters under the bed. It was scary, but not something that could happen in my real life, in my safe little neighborhood in East Texas. I learned very quickly just how wrong I was. My mom was a single mother of 3, working full-time as a charge nurse while also battling cancer. She was, and is, a superhero. Because of her long hours at the hospital, I often went to my grandparents' house after school. I loved going there. They spoiled me rotten and let me do things I could not do at home. My favorite thing was my bright blue Razor scooter. Their house and my uncle's house were right next to each other, connected by a long, smooth concrete driveway that was perfect for riding. One afternoon in late September, I was playing in their fenced-in backyard with their old golden retriever Sadie. It was brutally hot, the kind of thick, humid heat that settles over Texas and refuses to leave. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and was already sweating. Through the slats in the fence, I heard the familiar rumble of my grandpa's old pickup truck starting. I heard it pull out of the driveway and head down the street. A jolt of excitement went through me. With his truck gone, the entire double driveway was now my personal scooter raceway. Normally, I was supposed to go inside and tell my grandma I was going to the front yard. She would keep the front door open so she could watch me. But I was impatient. I did not want to waste a single second of precious scooter time. I unlatched the gate to the backyard, ran to the front porch where my scooter was leaning against the wall, and started riding. I zoomed back and forth from my grandparents' carport to my uncle's, the wheels humming on the warm concrete. I was completely lost in my own world. After a few minutes, I noticed a figure at the far end of the block, walking slowly in my direction. The only reason he caught my eye was because of what he was wearing. On this sweltering 95-degree day, the man had on long, dark pants and a heavy winter jacket with the hood pulled up over his head. His hands were stuffed deep in his pockets, and his head was tilted down, so I could not see his face. It was so bizarre that it broke through my 5-year-old focus. Thinking about what the police officer had said at school, a little seed of nervousness was planted in my stomach. I tried to ignore it. I made another lap on my scooter, up and down both driveways. When I looked again, the man was closer, and he was walking faster now. My mind started racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe he was a friend of my uncle's? My uncle had a lot of friends who came and went. That seemed possible. This time, I decided to only ride up and down my grandparents' driveway, keeping closer to the house. I reached the end of the driveway by the street and turned around. The man was now at the edge of my uncle's yard. And then he did something that made all my rationalizations evaporate. He turned sharply and started cutting across the grass, heading directly for me. There was no doubt anymore. He was coming for me. Pure instinctual terror took over. I threw my scooter to the ground. It clattered loudly on the concrete. I turned and ran as fast as my little legs could carry me, not to the front door, but to the side gate leading to the backyard. I scrambled through it, and in a moment of panic, my first thought was of my dog. I imagined this scary man stealing her. I grabbed Sadie by the collar and dragged the confused, gentle dog with me into the house through the back door. I found my grandma sitting on the couch, watching her soap operas. I was out of breath and terrified. "Grandma," I panted, "can you go see if there's a man outside?" She looked at me, confused, but got up and peered through the blinds of the front window. After a moment, she said, "Yes, there's a man, but he's walking away down the street." I did not tell her what had happened. I was scared I would get in trouble for being in the front yard without telling her. The fear was so much bigger than the fear of getting scolded, but I could not explain it. I am so incredibly grateful that my school had that assembly. I honestly do not know if I would have recognized the danger or reacted so quickly without the officer's words echoing in my head. That incident terrified me. It took months before I felt comfortable playing outside again, even in the safety of the fenced backyard. About a year later, I finally felt brave enough to venture into the front yard again, but I stayed hidden in the narrow space between my grandparents' house and my uncle's, building a small fort out of old cardboard boxes. As I was arranging my fort, I heard a car driving down our quiet street. It was an old, rusty sedan. As it got level with my grandparents' house, it slammed on its brakes, the tires squealing on the hot asphalt. I peeked over the top of my box. There were 2 men in the front seat, and they were both pointing directly at me. I could see their faces clearly through their windshield. They were not smiling. I did not wait for a second. I took off for the backyard again, my heart pounding in my chest. As I ran, I heard the car's engine roar as it peeled out and sped away down the street. I will never know if those men had bad intentions, or if they were just surprised to see a little kid hiding between two houses. But for a 6-year-old who already had a terrifying encounter with a stranger, it was more than enough. That second scare solidified my fear. I did not play in the front yard again for the next 2 years. The world had shown me its teeth, and I had no intention of getting bitten. My biggest mistake in high school was signing up for a P Physics as a sophomore. In the fall of 2018, I walked into a classroom filled with intimidating seniors, feeling completely out of place. My teacher, a well-meaning but oblivious man named Mr. Albright, decided the best way to integrate me was to sit me next to the only other underclassman in the room. He was a freshman named Caleb. Caleb gave off a strange vibe from the moment I sat down. He had a sloppily shaved head that showed patches of his scalp, and his eyes seemed vacant, like he was looking through you rather than at you. He was short and wiry, but carried himself with a tense, coiled energy. The first thing Mr. Albright had us do was exchange phone numbers with our lab partners for study purposes. When I handed my phone to Caleb, my skin crawled. Sitting next to him felt like sitting next to a starving dog while holding a steak. It felt like at any second, he could lunge. I had this powerful, unexplainable feeling that him knowing my name and having my number was a very, very bad thing. For the first few weeks, nothing happened. He never spoke to me in class and never texted me. I started to relax, telling myself I was being overly judgmental and that he was probably just a socially awkward kid who was as intimidated as I was. Then, one day, he turned to me and asked, "You're the girl with the old blue Ford Ranger, right?" I was surprised he knew what I drove. Reluctantly, I said that I was. He told me he was into cars and that he thought my truck was cool. He seemed so innocent and nice that my guard came down. We started talking a little more, and after that, he started texting me. At first, the texts were normal. He asked about homework, about my day, and shared things about himself. He seemed lonely. Against my better judgment, I let myself believe he was just a harmless, misunderstood kid. The average conversations continued for about a month. I worked a part-time job at a diner about 20 minutes from my house, and because they had a strict no phones policy, I would usually turn my phone off when I got there and not turn it back on until I was home. One weeknight, I got home around midnight after a long closing shift. I was exhausted. I plugged my phone in and it lit up with a barrage of notifications, all from Caleb. I scrolled through them and my stomach twisted into a knot. The messages were a sudden, bizarre confession. "I love you," one read. "Be my girlfriend," said another. "I want to take you to homecoming." It was not a request. It felt like a demand. The tone was possessive and deeply unsettling. I tried to let him down gently, telling him I was not interested and that I was going to bed. His response was 2 words. No. Just no. That single message freaked me out more than all the others combined. I dreaded going to class on Monday, but I had no choice. When I walked in, he was already at our table, and he gave me that same hungry dog stare from the first day. I ignored him for the entire class period. When the bell rang, I practically sprinted out of the room. As I got to my truck in the student parking lot, I saw him standing on the sidewalk, watching me drive away. It was more than creepy. It felt predatory. I immediately called one of my good guy friends, a tall, burly football player named Mark, and asked if I could drive him home from school for a while. A lot of people thought I was overreacting, but my gut was screaming that I was in danger and needed someone in the car with me. That night, when I got home from work, there were more texts from Caleb. This time, they were much worse. They were graphic, detailing sexual acts he wanted me to perform on him. He described my truck, my hair, the way I dressed. He had clearly been watching me closely. Foolishly, I did not block him right away. I did not know what to do. The messages continued for another couple of weeks until they hit a breaking point. He started sending texts about how, if I did not love him, he would have to kill himself. At that point, I knew I had to involve the school. I went to the dean, a woman named Mrs. Gable. Her reaction was infuriating. She listened to my story, looked at the messages, and then explained that Caleb had special needs and an IEP. She told me to cut him some slack and that he likely wouldn't do anything. She promised to talk to him, but it was clear she was not taking the threat seriously. The system that was supposed to protect me was protecting him. I told my dad everything. He and two of his friends from his construction crew, both massive, intimidating men, started keeping an eye on things. I finally blocked Caleb's number, and the messages stopped. But that was when the truly terrifying stuff began. The security cameras outside our house started picking up a figure in our yard at night. A short, wiry person who looked exactly like Caleb. The footage showed him trying my car door handle and peering into my bedroom window. My dad called the cops, who were amazing. They started parking a patrol car on our street at night for a while, and the nightly visits stopped. But Caleb just moved on to a new tactic. My manager at the diner started getting calls from him, asking when my shifts were. My manager alerted security, who threatened him with a trespassing charge if he called again. So, he started coming to the diner every day. He would sit in a booth in my section for hours, just watching me. He would leave folded paper cranes on the table with messages written inside them. "I love you," one said. Another read, "Your new boyfriend isn't good for you." "I am." He knew I had started dating someone. He started following me at school from class to class. I would see his car behind me on my way to and from work. My world became very small. I refused to go anywhere alone. Finally, my dad decided enough was enough. We went to court and got a restraining order. He was legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me or contacting me for 5 years. Thankfully, that finally made it stop. The year-long nightmare was over. I did not see Caleb again until my senior year. I was walking down the hall with my friends, laughing about something, when I saw him. He was standing by the lockers. He saw me coming, and he froze. As I walked past, he slowly turned his head, following me with his eyes. It was the exact same hungry dog look that had scared me so much on the very first day I met him. All the fear came rushing back. The last time I saw him was at graduation. I was on the stage, waiting for my name to be called. I scanned the audience for my family, and my eyes locked onto a face in the front row. It was him. He was not smiling or clapping. He was just sitting there, watching me. I will never know for sure if he was there for me, but a part of me knows he was. This whole experience stole my sense of safety for years, but it also taught me to always trust my instincts. My parents' divorce when I was 8 was messy. My mom struggled with alcohol, and after a few doers, my dad was given full custody of me and my younger sister, Lily. We moved out of our old house and into a new rental in a quiet suburb outside of Denver. This meant a new neighborhood, a new life, and a new elementary school. The school was only about 6 blocks away, technically close enough to walk, but Lily was only in 1st grade and I was in 3rd, so we were too young to go alone. My dad would either walk us in the morning or, more often, pick us up in his reliable black sedan after school. The pickup system at our new school was pretty standard. Each class would line up outside with their teacher, and as parents pulled their cars up, a staff member with a walkie-talkie would ask who they were there for and then go find the student. Since my mom was in jail at the time, the only person who ever picked us up was our dad. He was our constant, our safe harbor in the storm of our family's upheaval. One afternoon, a few months into the school year, we were waiting outside in our class lines. It was a chilly day, and I was eager to get into my dad's warm car. After a few minutes, Lily came running over to me from her 1st grade line, her face pale and her eyes wide with confusion. "Someone's here to pick us up," she said in a small voice. "But it's not Dad." I felt a jolt of alarm. "What do you mean?" I asked. "A man in a car," she explained. "The teacher brought me to him. He said our names. He said, 'I'm here for Sarah and Lily.' He smiled at me and said Dad told him to get us. But I didn't know him, so I told the teacher I had to find you first before I got in. Thank God for my little sister's caution. Our dad had drilled it into us from a young age. Never talk to strangers and never, ever get in a car with someone you do not know. I grabbed Lily's hand and ran to my teacher, quickly explaining what my sister had just told me. A look of sheer panic washed over her face. She told us to stay exactly where we were and rushed off to find the principal. A few minutes later, our dad's familiar black sedan pulled up. We scrambled in, and the relief was so overwhelming, I almost started crying. We told him the whole story on the way home. He tried to stay calm for our sake, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He asked Lily to describe the man in the car as best she could, and then he called the police and gave them the information, as vague as it was. Life went on, and the incident started to fade, but a new layer of anxiety now coated our daily routine. About a month later, it happened again. This time, the staff member called my name. "Sarah, your ride is here." I walked toward the front of the line and saw a black car that looked almost identical to my dad's. I started to run toward it, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders. It was only when I was a few feet from the passenger door that I caught a glimpse of the driver. It was not my dad. He was a middle-aged man with a pale, gaunt face and sharp, angular features. We made eye contact for a split second. His mouth was stretched into a wide smile, but his eyes were all wrong. They were squinty and cold, almost angry. A wave of ice water washed through me. This had to be the man who had tried to get Lily. I froze, then spun around to alert the teacher who had walked me to the car. But by the time I turned back, the car was already pulling away, speeding out of the school parking lot. I could not get the license plate number. I could only give my dad and the police a slightly better description of the man's face. Without more to go on, they could not do much. My dad had a serious talk with the school administration, who promised to tighten up their pickup protocols. The last time I saw him was almost a year later, near the end of the school year. The fear had subsided into a constant low-level vigilance. That day, I was walking home with a big group of kids from my neighborhood. We were laughing and joking, feeling safe in our numbers. A car slowed down as it passed us on the street. I glanced over and my blood ran cold. It was him. The same pale, angular face, the same wrong eyes. He was looking right at us. I recognized him instantly. "Run!" I screamed to my friends. We all took off, a panicked herd of children. Luckily, we were only a few houses down from my friend Jessica's place. We piled into her house, slamming the door behind us, terrifying her poor mom as we all tried to explain what had just happened. I never saw him again after that day. Shortly after, my dad started dating the woman who would become my stepmom, and we moved across the city to her neighborhood and switched schools. The move was a relief, but I still think about him sometimes. His face appeared in a dream just a few nights ago, which is what prompted me to finally write this down. I am in my 20s now, and I still have no idea who he was. I do not know how he knew our names or where we went to school. Was he just a random predator, or was he connected to us in some way I will never understand? All I know is that my tiny 6-year-old sister's decision to come find me first saved us from a fate I cannot bear to imagine.